All right, let's get to work, shall we? So there's a couple things inside of Animate that I want to draw focus to as we continue our exposure into the craft of animation using our tool set. Okay? First and foremost, I want us to look at a very interesting architecture in the software that's going to be an inhibitor to you if you're not aware of it. Okay? So if you wouldn't mind, bring open Adobe Animate here real fast. Start a new project file. I'm using the same HD TV 720 preset found inside of the media playback templates. Okay? Just have something on your stage.
Did you say 720 or 1080?
720, please. You are more than welcome to do 1080. More than welcome. Yeah. It's just more pixels for you to have to deal with, but I'm cool either way. Yeah.
I do not remember how you opened that one. The other day when I was doing my homework, I just hit open a new file.
So to create a new project, just do File, New. Don't do File Open, do File New. Okay? And you'll get this little handy-dandy wizard. Okay? Yeah, so what we're going for is the title safe area HD TV 720. And you can, yeah, templates. And that's in the media playback category over here on the left. Okay. All right, so check this out. Okay, I want to turn off, I'm just going to delete my title action safe layer here real fast. Okay. And I want to show you guys something. Okay. Check this out. This is part of the oddities of drawing with Animate. Because Animate has a kind of interesting illustration engine. I think it's important to remember that Animate does not equal, in any sense, Photoshop. Okay? I think far too often it's like, oh, it's an Adobe app. They should all behave kind of the same. And if Adobe is listening to the live stream, they should all behave the same. But we don't have that, right? They're very, very different to one another. Okay? How Animate chooses to draw its pixels and its shapes is very different than how Photoshop does it. Let me draw a literal example for you. So I'm going to put, okay, I'm just going to draw a circle. Just a big old circle. I apologize. I'm going to do this without a stroke just to make sure it's real easy. Okay? It's a big old circle, big old green circle in my frame. Okay. Now, in addition, one of the things that we also need. Actually, let me take a step back. I'm going to draw another circle. This time, I'm going to draw it in red. Something like that. Okay. Now, if we were to go back to the direct selection tool, the dark arrow. Keyboard shortcut V, V as in Victor. It's a good one to commit to memory, by the way. You're going to be using it a lot. Now check it out. Of course, I can grab both of these shapes. See how we're getting this little dotted line infill on both of these shapes? I can select them individually. Okay. Watch what happens when I grab this red one and move it to the side. Interesting, huh? Not what you would imagine, okay? Check this out. You can even put it back. Okay? What's going to happen now? Yep. Oop, didn't do it that time because I didn't deselect it. I'm sorry. You got to deselect it. Now when I grab it, it's going to be eaten away a little bit. Yeah, it's like a little hungry worm or hungry caterpillar eating away our apple. Okay, this is going to be a landmine that often you're going to step on if you're not aware of a very important feature inside of Animate called object drawing mode. Okay, if you're like me who want to make all these wonderful shapes and to be able to edit all of these shapes independently as we go, object drawing mode is going to be an important part of our production pipeline. Let me show you how it's different. I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. Just select and hit backspace real fast. Okay. Same thing. Just going to draw a circle, but this time, and you have to do this before you click and drag a shape inside of your canvas. Okay. I'm going to turn on object drawing mode. This. Okay. Object drawing mode can be found right underneath the stroke and fill properties. It also is found at the bottom of your toolbar. Whee! Down here at the bottom is that button. So at the very least, you're always going to have access to it. Make sure that it's on. Okay? Because now when we do our same thing, I'll make a big green sphere like I did last time. Okay. Make another one. This time I'll make it the same color red. Exact same thing. Okay. Hit the V key to get the direct selection tool, but this time, and I know it's difficult, okay, I'm going to do it on the green one because it's definitely a little bit easier to see in the green one. This time, when I click on that green one, how is it different? Yeah, it's got lines around it. It's got a path with a whole series of anchor points around the shape. We're not seeing that dotted fill pattern, that selection pattern show up on the interior of our shape. This is a good indication that you've created an independent object from the rest of your scene. Okay? And we're going to take advantage of this here as well. So check it out. Now I can grab the same dotted line, but it's difficult to see it here on the dark red. There it is. Now these are truly independent shapes that I can place and move anywhere that I want inside of my canvas. Okay? Which is pretty neat. That's a whole lot of fun. It's a whole lot of fun. So make sure, here's my suggestion to you, make sure that object drawing mode is on before you start. Okay? That way you retain 100% of the shapes that you've created, and you'll get something that is going to serve your interests. Now in this space, how can I get, maybe I want the green, or like the, maybe I'm creating an animation of like a planet, like the moon going around a green sun. Okay, starting Lunar New Year, so this whole idea of the planets is important. Okay, how can I push the red sphere behind the green sphere?
Bring it forward.
Yeah, so you can right click on the green one, and then it's under arrange. So bring to the front. Now the green's in front. Okay. Larger point being, we don't have to rely exclusively on the layer stack in our timeline to get this layering. We can move, once these shapes are independent, we now can push and pull these shapes, in any sort of order we want on our stage. Yes, ma'am?
Do they have to be deselected? Because when I hover over range, it doesn't give me the option.
Yes, because that shape was drawn with object drawing mode off. And I know that because I see a little dotted line pattern show up on the inside.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I did that one before.
Yeah. That's why turning object drawing mode on is so important. Okay. All right. So good to know. Good to know that we can arrange these differently. Bring that one to the front. Boom. And we're on our way. So we have a lot of control here as to how all this works. Okay. Now, a couple other tools that's going to make our lives a little bit better. Okay. Because starting this week, we're going to start to get a little bit more comfortable working inside of our space. Okay. Last week was kind of mechanical. Now we get to talk about the creativity of it. And I'm going to get rid of this red guy because it's a little bit easier to see the path going around my green guy. Okay. So you can see we have a whole bunch of control vertices. A path is going to be connected or created between the control vertices. Well, what if I want to go in and edit this shape? Okay. That's what the white arrow is all about. This guy. The sub-selection tool, keyboard shortcut A. A is an alpha. Now I can go in and select individual pieces. Oops, I clicked off it. Come on, there we go. There we go. And I can change. I dragged out a box. There. Come on now. I'm missing it by a pixel. There it is. I can't chew gum and walk down the street at the same time. But now I can very quickly transform this shape into anything that I want. That's with the sub-selection tool. This is another added benefit of being in object drawing mode, is that we now have access to all the vector paths and vector points that are responsible for creating these vector shapes, okay? Which is pretty cool. If you're used to working in Adobe Illustrator, this is something that you've probably have seen many, many, many times before. But if you're new, the sub-selection tool is really important. Now, in addition, there's this fella right here. The transform tool, the free transform tool. Okay? The free transform tool, when on, is going to allow us to do any number of things to our drawings. Okay? Including, if we go in the corners here, we can resize things. Okay? The shift key is going to modify and either constrain our scale or allow us to disproportionately scale it, which is kind of fun. Okay? In addition, if we also put our cursor towards the edge here, what does that icon represent?
Rotate.
Rotate. So we now can very easily rotate this shape inside of our viewport. We rotate it. That's awesome. Now what is this thing? This little white dot in the center. Yeah, this is the center point. You got it. This is the center point for this object. When we transform this object, it's going to be transformed around that white dot. Okay? Watch what happens. When I rotate it, it's rotating around that white dot. The rest of the shape moves. Okay? When I scale it, it scales around that dot. Okay? Well, what if I wanted to scale it around a dot over here? Well, we can left click and drag on it, put it where we want it to go, maybe down over there, for example. And now we can get a different effect. So these center points are editable. We can change them. Something that's going to be really important for us as we go through this week's homework assignment with our bouncing ball, okay? Especially when we're trying to create the illusion of squash and stretch. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to get the middle point locked back into the middle, like in the button,
So the question was, is there a way to get this back in there? Like exactly. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, let's do this. Let's completely deselect it. And then I'm going to grab the transform tool again. I'm going to put it way over here in the corner. And then I'm going to go through that entire process. So I've gone to the direct selection tool. I've deselected everything. If I grab it again and grab the free transform tool, nope, still docked down over there. Could be in the modify menu. Let's see. Modify. I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of off the top of my head. Yeah, it could be in here, but I'm not sure. Okay. So the shape tools allow us a certain degree of flexibility when we're in object drawing mode. They now kind of change their role very directly. However, probably the thing that we want to use the most, yeah, go ahead. Double click on what? Double click on that. There it is. David figured it out. Double clicking on the center point will return it to the center of its bounding box. Good. I would never have done that. I would never have done that. Great job, Dave. Boom. There it is. Okay. All right. So these shape tools are really great, but that's kind of not what we're here for, is these shape tools, right? We want to be able to draw our objects. And our bouncing ball, and going forward into next week, we want to be drawing as much of this as we can, right? So our drawing tools play a much more important role for what it is that we're trying to do. And I want to demonstrate our drawing tools for you real fast, and then we'll start talking about how we can lay out our homework in our lab. Because our lab this week is going to allow us to very quickly and very directly start fleshing out some important ideas. So drawing tools, you find them right here instead of our toolbars. If you think about it, these are all the creation tools in here. Pen tool, the text tool, lines, squares, ovals, polygons. But these three tools here are our shape tools. Now there are some big differences between them. If you were to go into Photoshop, the pencil tool and the brush tool, they work very similar. There are differences, don't get me wrong. The differences here in Animate are very extreme, and I want you to be aware of it, okay? At the core of the Animate drawing system is this idea of a vector drawing system. What is a vector shape in comparison to a bitmap? Yeah. You got it. You got it. I'm a teacher, so I got to draw something on the board. It's kind of my thing. All right. So warning, science content. You guys ever see that? You guys ever watch the show Mythbusters? I used to love Mythbusters, and every once in a while when they talked about the actual science and the physics of whatever it is, they had a big thing like, warning, science. Okay, we're going to do us some educating this morning, all right? Okay, so bitmaps. Bitmaps. We have been making bitmaps fundamentally for thousands of years, okay? When you go back into ancient times, we've actually been making bitmap images, clearly just not with digital tools, right? Bitmaps take their inspiration from mosaics, okay? If you were to zoom it, so bitmaps are pixel-based, okay? These are pixels. What in the world is a pixel? I like it. You guys were all kind of saying good descriptions. A container, it's small, it's rectangular or square in shape. Yeah, it is a, I like to think of it as a square of color, okay, or a rectangle of color. How many colors can a pixel be? One, okay? By definition, by rule, a pixel can only be a single color, okay? Mosaics are such a wonderful kind of analog to this whole idea, right? Because have you guys seen those beautiful ceramic mosaics from the ancient world? They're wonderful. You get right up next to them, it's very clear when you're right next to them that they're little just chunks of ceramic, colored pieces of ceramics kind of put together into some mortar. But when you take a gigantic step back, you're like, oh my God, it's this beautiful, beautiful fresco of a landscape or a person, right? We're kind of doing the exact same thing. If you were to take a picture, or if you were to zoom in on the picture of something you did on your phone, for example, you get into 1,000% magnification, you're going to see individual blocks of color. Same thing. They're grids of rectangles, kind of like this. Okay, grid of rectangles. And we're going to pretend that that's an evenly spaced grid, okay? This is an art class, so we're allowed to pretend, okay? It's not like a science class where it's got to be like facts and measurable and all that crap. Okay, so grid of pixels, okay? Now, if we were to try to describe a ball, okay, with this number of pixels, the best that we can be able to realistically do is something kind of like this. There it is. That is a ball, okay? The problem for us, especially in the digital world, right? In order to make things more accurate, what do we need to do? Add more pixels, right? Add more pixels. And luckily for you guys, at this state in our technology, we have millions of pixels being captured by the photography gear. Every image that we take with a camera or a piece of photography gear is a bitmap image. It's a grid of pixels stacked on top of each other, and then when we look at it from a big distance, we see a picture of me. But really, it's just a whole bunch of colored rectangles. Okay. This in wholesale is very different to the vector drawing engine that we have here in Animate, right? So vector images are what? And I'm going to take that one step forward. You're absolutely right. They are lines. We're going to define them as paths. Okay. Pixels versus paths. Okay. The computer creates a mathematical representation of a shape based off of a whole series of control points. Instead of us creating a grid, we create these control points, and then the computer literally connects the dots, man. How cool is that, right? And it creates these paths. The curvature of the path is determined by what's called the tangency of the control points themselves, okay? Since this is a mathematical representation of a shape, why is it awesome? Super accurate. Math will never fail us, right? Why else is it really great? It's also resolution independent. I can make this shape any size I want, and it's always going to be perfect because math always scales, okay? In comparison to a bitmap image, you guys have seen this online. Someone's taken a picture that's very small, and they've stretched it, and they can see all the jagged edges. You can start to see each individual pixel, because once we create a pixel, we can never change its size, okay? Once it's created, it's always going to be that color. It's always going to be that size, right? So when we transform it afterwards, something small is going to turn into something big, right? So with vector images, since it's all mathematical, basically, okay, I can use one image for a business card, and then I can go ahead and use that exact same image and scale it up to go on a billboard. It's fundamentally the exact same piece of artwork, and it's still going to look perfect in both of those worlds, right? These are also very, very small in file size. Very teeny tiny. Versus bitmaps, which are huge, huge, especially at the high end. Okay, I've done some high end work, and the file sizes are huge, like 140 megabytes for one frame. What? It's bonkers. It's bonkers. Okay, so we're making at the core. Animate wants to be a vector drawing app. It wants to be. Okay, it tries really hard. Okay, it comes in second place. It's not a great vector drawing app, but it's a decent vector drawing app. Okay, these three tools almost speak quite wonderfully to this idea and this kind of endeavor, if you will, to be a vector drawing app. Let's look at the pencil real fast. Okay, pencil tool. Whee! Okay, there it is. It's the pencil tool. Now, right now, the stroke value is determining the line width. So at 37, that's what we get. Okay. I'm going to make it black so it's a little bit easier to see. Now, I want you to look very carefully. Watch how I'm drawing. I'm drawing with the mouse. Watch what happens here with the pencil tool when I let go and mouse up. What happened? Did you guys see it? Here it comes again. Yeah, did you guys see it smooth out? Okay. Animate with the pencil tool is always going to smooth your stroke because it's trying to resolve all of those jagged edges. Okay. It's trying to make this as consistent as it can. Over in our properties panel, this value right here determines the amount of smoothing. But is it on? No, it's all grayed out. Thumbs down. So with the pencil tool, we fundamentally can't control the amount of smoothing that's happening to our strokes, which can be a barrier for us. Okay? See how I can't change it? Now, in comparison, we have the brush tool. This guy. We're going to come back to the paintbrush tool. There's a major flaw in the Adobe Animate user experience. We have the paintbrush, then we have the paintbrush tool, then we have the brush tool. On the surface, these feel the same, don't they? But they're not. They're very different. We're going to skip the paintbrush tool and go to the third one, keyboard shortcut B, and then all of a sudden, dun, 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 notice what is available to us. The smoothing algorithm, okay, or the smoothing amount. We can physically do the exact same thing, but now I can increase the smoothing. Let me do something really extreme. There it is, and I did too good of a job. We can increase the smoothing. Yeah, see how it smoothed it out? Or I can fundamentally turn it off. And then what you see is what you get. All the little jaggies that I put in there are going to stay. I like the brush tool far more than the pencil tool because I'm in control, right? Because sometimes I want to maybe have those little jaggies in there, or they serve a purpose for the drawing that I'm creating. This puts me in the driver's seat of that entire equation. Know that it's there, and know that with the defaults, it's going to try to smooth out all of your drawings or all your strokes to create a much more, I don't know, pleasing drawing. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's just what it does. Okay. Now, in addition, one of the cool things that we get with this vector drawing tool is that we can go back in and edit this stuff after the fact. Okay. Now, this kind of represents a problem that we have. Okay, it's going to produce. I'm in the transform tool. I'm sorry, the direct selection tool. It's going to try to produce like 1,000 different control points. You can see them over here. 1,000 different control points. You're never going to be able to really go in and select them because they're so close to one another. Okay. However, if I was to, I'm not going to click on it, but see when I get my cursor to the edge, like that. What does that little icon there represent, you think? Yeah. See how I'm kind of changing some of those control points? In other examples, it's a little bit more obvious. This one's kind of breaking it at the moment. And I think it has everything to do with the fact that on this shape I turned that smoothing off. Let's put it back to something quite normal. Now we're not going to get as many. Smoothed it out. There it is. Yep. Now I can make some pretty big sweeping changes. And with the smoothing pretty high, I can actually grab the control points now. Oops, sub-selection tool. And begin to edit this manually. Okay. Now the last one that we have, and excuse me while I get rid of this big green thingamajig, is the paintbrush tool. This one. Highly recommend that you avoid this one like the plague. Okay. This is, I want to show you how it works. Okay. So that you're aware that it's there, because in certain situations I'm sure it's useful. But generally speaking, this is not a general kind of illustration tool. Okay. This is good if you're trying to do like, you know, blades of grass or something. Okay. Or, you know, single stroke items that don't need a lot of additional work on top of them. So with the paintbrush tool, what am I drawing now? Those little dotted lines. Boop, you let go, then it fills in those dotted lines. Okay. If we look at it, can you guys see that path? And I apologize, it's kind of a weird color. It doesn't put the paths around the outside of the shape like it did with the brush tool. It's putting a singular path down the center. Okay. We can continue to go in and modify that shape with our sub-selection tool if we'd like. The other cool benefit about this, now I'm going to select it real fast. Yep, let's make sure it's selected. And this is cool, but it's, you know, it's not super handy as a style. Okay. Since it's a vector shape, we can change its style. Oops, I may not have it selected. Yeah. It goes to show you how often I do this, because I really don't. Of course, we can change its color, but you can't change the style. There it is. I just didn't have it selected. Oh, it's not doing the dotted lines because the dots are too close. But there's another one. There it is. So you can change your strokes after the fact. I'm not entirely sure why you'd want to do this, but it's there. It's there as a function. So just be aware that there's a big difference between those three brushes. Okay. My recommendation to you is to use the brush tool, not the paintbrush tool. Okay. That's going to feel probably at most home for you. This one right here. It's going to behave the way, in every sense, it should behave. It's just a straight up brush tool. Okay. Always make sure that you're painting with object drawing mode on. That way, if you do something like this, you can always go back in, select the shape, and move it out of the way, and it's not going to eat away at those other strokes underneath. This idea of object drawing mode kind of persists through all of our brush tools as well, with it off. A lot of folks, they get caught in trouble because you don't have a big icon down here like we did earlier, right? But the mode is enabled down here at the bottom. So now I got it off. Okay, and smoothed it out. Let's make another one now in yellow. Why not? Okay. If I was to go and select them, see how it eats it. Object drawing mode is going to be your enemy. Okay. So be aware of its influence on your scene. Okay. All right. So here's what I want us to do, just for a couple minutes. Let's return to Canvas, and we're going to start working on our lab. All right, so our lab this week is a single jump. Okay, you're going to expand upon this for your homework, and you're going to do 3 jumps. But we want to start incorporating some of these big principles of animation that are going to drive our movement, or our understanding and consideration for our movements. Okay, so given everything that we've talked about today, squash and stretch and arcs are really going to be the two that we're going to focus on the most for this animation. Okay. Now, what does squash and stretch provide for us? Believability? How?
That it's actually happening. It's not just a static thing.
It's not just a static thing, and it's reacting to its own movements, and it's reacting to the larger scene itself. Okay. So for us, we need to have a ground plane. Okay. We need to have something that our object can animate against. This is going to help very directly. So let's start laying this out. And of course, naturally, we're going to want to have some arcs in there as well. And recreation of illusion of gravity, that was last week, by the way, okay? All the stuff with the pendulum swing. Slowing in and slowing out. Our object is slowly going to start and then slowly end its movement, okay? So let's go and put a ground point in. Here, I'm just going to start a new project real quick. All right. I always like to start by setting the stage, background, okay? That way it's pretty straightforward. And I'm just going to simply just make sure the object drawing mode is on. I don't want a stroke, and I want my ground to be kind of a gray. There it is. Voila! Now, this is not a coloring book, okay? We can color outside the lines of our stage, as I've done here. But when I export this out, what's going to happen to all this stuff outside the boundaries of our stage? It's going to get cut off. So you can go outside your stage, by the way. You don't have to be like pixel perfect. And I think there's a viewport property in the upper right-hand corner that will clip the boundaries of your stage to only show you what's going to be exported. I'll let you explore that, okay? All right, so that's where my ball is going to jump from, okay? I'm going to create a new layer. There we go, bouncing ball. And this is where all my animation information for my ball is going to go. It's a great practice to start separating your background from your foreground apart from each other. That way you don't have to worry about one thing affecting another, right? They're kind of independent. So I think I'm going to uncreatively just use my oval tool to draw a lovely red ball. Something like that. Okay. There we go. All right. So I have my background. I have my, my actor, if you will, the ball. But let's start doing some planning here, okay? Animators are going to be we plan everything out, right? It's very difficult, as we talked earlier, to do this straight ahead, where you're just going to jump in and start animating frame by frame. It is very difficult to do that. I know that's going to be the natural tendency for a lot of folks, right? I want you to resist that urge, right? It's like when you're painting a room. Have you guys ever painted your room at home or in your apartment, if you're allowed to do that? What's the first, you go to Home Depot or whatever, right? You buy a couple gallons of paint. When you get home, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to open it and start painting it, right? Honestly, what should be the first thing you do? Not even before you shake it, but you are supposed to do that.
Figure out what wall you're going to paint.
Figure out what you're going to paint. I like plan it out, absolutely. In all honesty, what you're supposed to do before you start painting, you're supposed to wash your walls, right? Do you guys know that? No. Yeah, you're supposed to wash your walls, okay? Then what's the next thing you're supposed to do? You cover everything in plastic, absolutely, right? Here's another painting tip. I've painted a lot of houses in my day, right? Before you even tape down, you're supposed to sand your walls. Do you guys know that? Yeah. Yep. You want to get the top layer of paint, just a little bit of rough on the walls itself. That way the paint has something to hold on to when you're putting it on the new paint has something to hold on to when you're getting it on the wall.
Doesn't matter if it's flat or that rough.
Yeah, even we're not doing like 100 grit sandpaper. That's going to change the shape of your wall. But very lightly sanding your wall makes it textured a little bit. And that way the paint's going to stick and it's going to soak into your plaster quite directly. Like I said, I'm a nerd. Then what are you supposed to do when you paint your house or paint your room? Tape, right? Now you got to go out and mask and tape around all the windows, around the trim, around the doorknob, right? You're even supposed to tape, cover the ceiling a little bit too, because everyone thinks that when you're rolling your walls, oh, I'm not going to hit the ceiling, right? Oh, be careful. What happens? You always hit the ceiling, right? It doesn't matter how careful you always are going to hit the ceiling. So you want to kind of mask out the ceiling a couple inches to make sure that you don't accidentally hit the ceiling with your roller, right? Are these all things that you want to do? No, no one wants to do this, right? Because you just want to get the paint on the wall, and because that's really satisfying, right? But if you want to get the best quality result, these are the steps that are required. If you were to do all of this, if you were to do all the pre-planning, all the washing, the painting, all the washing, the sanding, the taping before you paint, guess what? Guess how long it takes to actually paint your walls?
Several days.
Actually, about 5 minutes. Rolling is pretty easy. If you do all this stuff works, just roll, 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 get your brush out, do all the edges. It goes fast. It goes a lot faster than people give it credit for. But if you don't do this, it's going to take a long time, right? Because then you're being very slow, okay? Being very careful to make sure they don't accidentally drip some paint. They don't accidentally get it on the ceiling, right? When everything's masked, the painting part almost becomes secondary to the entire process. We want to do the exact same thing when we're making our animations, okay? I know the inclination is to jump in and start animating, but there's some prep that we got to do in here, okay? There's some legit planning that we need to discover and explore before we start jumping in. And if we were to do this with some very simple basic tools initially, the process of animating actually goes a whole lot faster, okay? Guidelines are important for us. Let's experiment and explore how our little ball could be jumping without actually having to jump, okay? Without actually moving the ball around, okay? And I almost always do this with a whole series of guidelines, okay? Let's jump in. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this guides. Okay. Now on the guides layer, I'm just in experiment and explore mode. I'm not trying to create a final piece of artwork. I'm just trying to create some shapes that maybe could help me represent a way for me to very quickly create a motion path. Because we want to make sure that all of our objects move in arcs, right? Arcs. Nothing moves in a straight line. Your ball is not allowed to jump straight up and then perfectly straight back down again, because that's not real, right? It's impossible for you and I to jump up and then land in the exact same spot, right? So our ball should not do that either. We want it to jump a little bit. So it's not allowed to land in the exact same spot as it takes off from. So I'm on the guide layer. I'm going to return to my oval tool. However, this time, I'm going to turn off its fill. I'm going to turn on, I do it in light blue. You can literally do this in any color, I don't care. It's not going to show up in the final frame, okay? And once again, I'm going to draw a circle. Oh, I'm going to draw a circle. Hold on for 1 second. Let's put it back to a straight line. There we go. All right, now that is a little too big for me. I want to make it smaller, something like this. Okay, cool. So now what I'm exploring here isn't so much the shape itself of the circle, but the motion path, the railroad track, if you will, that my ball is going to take inside the scene itself. Okay? So that little blue line represents the motion path I want my ball to take. Okay? Now this stuff down here, clearly it's not going to move in a circle, it's just going to go up and down. So I'm going to ignore all this stuff for the time being, and I'm just going to initially look at this. Excuse me. So what I'm trying to figure out here. Say again? I'm just trying to figure out where it's going to go. Yeah, that's pretty good. So the middle point of my arc is where the ball is going to start. And then it's going to go up and then down. Okay? This is my guide. And these simple shape tools allow us to very quickly prototype the motion path without having to draw the motion path. Okay? So now I can go back to my bouncing ball layer. And I want to position the center point maybe over here. So my ball is in earnest is going to go woo, boom. Looks like I've gone a little too high. So if I go back to my guides, let's just bring it down some. Yep. That's it right there. I like that. So my ball is going to go woo, bonk. Okay? I've planned it out. Now I know what the movement's going to be in a macro sense. I can start going in and figuring out some key poses that I can use to describe this very quickly. Okay? All right. So the guides I'm going to lock. Shoot. I could even put the guides on a different layer if I want, but that's okay. I think here, at the very least, I'll put my guides behind my bouncing ball. That way they're not in the foreground. Okay? So on my bouncing ball layer, let's start figuring out what the key frames of this are going to be, right? Because there's going to be a handful of them in here, right? We have a key frame, let's define what the key frames are going to be. Big sense. What's the purpose of the key frames?
To show the motion
You got it. So we're trying to show the entire motion. What would be the basic building blocks of this entire motion? Think about what the audience absolutely needs to see and in order to understand what it is that we're crafting. You got it. If we were to take that guideline out of this entire equation, we need to make sure the audience understands where it starts, how high it's going to go, and where it's going to end. So those are 3 keyframes that we'll need to iron out pretty quickly, right? I like that. Let's do that real quick. That's pretty fast. All right. Okie dokie day. So here's my first keyframe. Pop quiz. How do I duplicate that keyframe? F6. You got it. F6. F6. Okay, so this one is going to be kind of like that middle point, right about in there. Yep, looks like I got pretty close to it. There we go. Awesome. I want to hit F6 one more time on my bouncing ball layer to get it back kind of where I started. And I'm just going to compare and contrast the starting points here. It's a little low. There we go. It's close enough for me. I'm pretty happy. Okay, so let's turn off our guides just for a second. So it starts, it bounces up, and then it comes down. Cool. Awesome. Am I done? No. Right. The next thing that we had, once we figured out the total extents, the extreme motions, we need to take in one step closer into the detail world and start laying down some squash and stretch. Because the squash and stretch is going to have a direct association with our audience's understanding of this. So let's add in a couple more keyframes. Okay? Maybe we start prototyping the extreme squash, right? Because the ball is going to start, it's going to squash down, jump up, come down, squash again, go back to its original shape. Or in my imagination, that's what I'm trying to do. Okay? Let's do that real fast. Okay, so over here on frame 1, I want another keyframe in between 1 and 3. Let's do it real fast. F6. Okay, now on this guy, oops, I did not hit F6. I apologize. I'm going to hit F5 and then convert it to F6. There we go. The reason it wasn't working is because I already had a keyframe preceding the first frame. Okay, so now on this one, this is where that free transform tool comes in, because I want to start squashing it down like that. But if I was to squash it from the center, am I going to get the illusion that I'm after? No. This is where being able to change the location of your center point really comes into play. Because now I can squash down like this. Okay? Go back a frame, frame 1, or first drawing, second drawing, third drawing, fourth drawing. It's going to push my guidelines out quite significantly. So we squash down, we jump up. That's the next keyframe. We come down. What's going to happen when we strike the ground? It's going to squash again. So I want to hit F6, give me a new keyframe. Excuse me. Change my center point. It's going to squash down. But then how long is it going to take for it to come back to its shape again, to its original shape? We'll need another drawing to determine that transition. Hit F6 one more time. Put it back. There it is. Down, up, down, and then up again. Okay? Those are the key frames. Those are the key frames that define the overall motion itself. Now the big challenge of this is adding all the in-between frames. It's figuring out the timing of those in-between frames to create this sense of illusion, sense of gravity that creates our illusion. One of the things that we always need to be mindful of are where our keyframes are and which frames inside of our larger sequence are the keyframes. So here's Pat's pro tip of the day. We're going to flag our keyframes. That way, visually, we understand in the timeline which frames are keyframes and which frames are in-betweens. Okay? It's really easy to do this. This is totally a hack. Again, if the developers at Adobe are listening to my live stream, you need to give me the ability to color code my keyframes. That'd be great. I should go work for Adobe and just fix animate, because I could do this, right? Seriously? I could do that. I know nothing about computer programming, but I'm sure I could fix this. I actually know a lot about computer programming, but I don't know that I could fix this. Okay, anyways, so here's Pat's trick of the day, Pat's pro tip. I'm going to select the first one, okay? And you can do this in all of them, but with any keyframe selected, the Properties tab over here has a label field, okay? And this is the part that's pretty rad. Check it out. If you were to type something in here, I'm just going to put Pat, hit return. Look what happens down in our timeline. What happens? Yeah, a little flag shows up, okay? I want to hit undo, get rid of that label. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this background layer because it's got a huge hold frame over there. Same thing, literally the exact same thing. If you were to type in there, okay, what you type actually shows up on the timeline itself, okay? This can be dangerous from time to time, especially when you have really long strings of text. Here's my suggestion to you. Put a period. Don't put a name or a letter. Just put a dot in there, a period. That way it's not visual noise. It doesn't get distracting. Yeah. So in whatever you put in the label field over here is going to show up in the timeline if there's enough room on the timeline. See down here? So I got a keyframe selected. Okay? I got it selected here in my timeline. And then on the right-hand side, in the Properties panel, there's a label field. Whatever you put in the name section of the label, it's going to show up on the timeline. But often, what we're trying to get is that little flag. That's the thing that we're after. It's a really fast way of color coding and putting icons in your timeline so that you can separate keyframes from in-between keyframes. Okay?
I'm having trouble finding where that is on the properties.
Let's see what's on your screen.
I'm under properties, but I'm still under the paintbrush
Okay.
tool, so.
Select your keyframe. There it is.
Oh.
Yep. You're welcome. All right. So I'm not going to put Pat in here. I'm just going to put a period. Okay? Just a dot. And then down in the timeline, of course, it's going to put a dot in there if it's available. But at the very least, that's not distracting. It's not like some text that you feel like you're compelled to read. So this is what I'm going to do for all of these frames. I think you can do them all at the same time. I'm just going to put a period in the label field. Hit return. Yeah. Now what this does in the timeline is put little flags in all those keyframes, which is what we're after, right? Because when we start to go in and add all the in-betweens, I want to be able to very quickly. Okay, so now I'm timing out the transition between all these frames. Like how long do I want it to squash? It's going to happen pretty quickly. I think 5 is too much. How long do I want? So it's going to squash down for a couple frames, and then it's going to jump. Okay, we're getting there. The top, let's put a couple in here. There we go. All right. So there's my real rough timing. Oops, excuse me. So adding these little flags is helpful. Because when we start adding physical in-betweens in here, these flags are going to help us kind of understand which frames are keyframes and which frames are in-betweens. Because once we timed it out by hitting the F5 key, now we can go in and convert those hold frames into keyframes itself. So I'm squishing down here. That's the target. Let's turn on my onion skinning. Okay, so on this drawing here, maybe it's down a little bit. On this next drawing, let's convert it. It's down a little bit more. Something like that. See how down on the timeline, I can very easily differentiate which ones are keyframes and which ones are in-betweens, okay? If I need to go back in and make an edit, I'm likely to edit the keyframes first, because the keyframes are the targets for all of this, right? The in-betweens take us to the targets, but they're still relying on the keyframes to showcase the work, okay? So I want you to start incorporating these two new ideas into your animations this week. The ideas of guides, okay, that will help define your motion paths, okay? At the end of this, the guides are going to be turned off, so we don't want to see them. They're just kind of a utility that helps us very quickly start to visualize the motion paths, okay? So let's make sure that they're turned off, okay? In addition, also start labeling your keyframes to get those little flags. That way, when you're in-betweening, it's a little bit easier. Okay. Please make sure for this week's lab assignment that you're doing squash and stretch, like we just done here. Okay. Also remember our principle of arcs and the principle of slow in, slow out, our timing ideas that we talked about last week. Okay. I've started to prototype some of that with the frames that you see in front. Okay. Your animation for your lab has to have a background, so please make sure you add some sort of bar like I have here that will communicate to your audience what this ball is reacting against. It really does help. If without that background in there, it's not going to feel like your object is pushing off of anything. Okay. One of the things that I would really recommend that you look at is the ability to go in and change the vector paths as well. Like for me, it's driving me crazy that, oops, excuse me. I'm so zoomed in that it's not working. Let's magnify it. Come on, there it is. Yeah. Sometimes you got to click another one. There it is. Okay. I guess it's driving me crazy that it's not perfectly flat. Ah. There it is. I want to lock my background. That's what was causing it to not work. I was selecting the background and animate went, no, I'm not going to do that for you. There we go. So experiment with shapes, okay? Changing the tangency of all those handles will allow you to create a little bit more representative squash and stretch than just kind of an oval that's been squished down. Experiment with that. You're free to hand draw these as well. You don't have to use the shape tools to create any of this stuff. So use whatever illustration tools and animate that you find is easiest to use, okay? Don't fight the tools. If something else is easier, use that, okay? Okay. So this is going to be 48 frames, okay? 48 frames, okay? To get a ball to go squash stretch up, contact squash stretch up, it's going to be about 48 frames, okay? Plan out the keyframes. Plan out these keyframes, okay? Go through our process and it gets a lot easier, okay? When you're done with the lab assignment, please make sure you're exporting your animate document and your animated GIF. Submit them here to the Dropbox on Canvas. Life is good.
Is the 48 frames for a single jump, or is it like going back and forth?
Total, yeah, all together.
Okay.
All together. So if you think about it,
Kind of like the 10th film.
yeah, this is all together. So if you think about it, I'm not even done with mine, and I'm already at 30 frames, timing everything out. To get to 48, I mean, I still have some work in here that I need to do. So it's total for the entire movement, okay? So that's for your lab. Just a single jump, okay? Single jump, okay? Now for your homework, we're going to supersize it. Same idea. Actually, it's the exact same idea, but this time we're changing the parameters ever so slightly. Now we're going to be bouncing the ball and having it jump 3 times, or having it fall and strike the ground 3 times, okay? Same thing, same thing. Please make sure you're demonstrating a little bit of squash and stretch. Each time the ball hits the ground, it should be squashing. I've given you a great example of what a successful project looks like down here at the bottom. You can see the importance of that squash and stretch on the animation frames themselves. Not only are we squashing and stretching as we strike the ground, but we're also elongating out to anticipate the strike. Okay? Those are 2 helpful things that will help create a really compelling, simple animation. At least 3 jumps. You can do more than this. It doesn't have to be a ball. It doesn't even have to be a ball hitting the ground. It has to be something bouncing, okay? I've seen just about everything. I've seen Mario jumping over pipes, okay? And then, of course, when Mario hits the ground, he squashes and stretches as he jumps. That's cool, right? I think at the end of that one, he got eaten by one of those big flower things, which is cool.
I thought I was doing loud, but I think I just did the homework instead.
Great, great. So, please use your creativity on this. Don't feel like it has to be a ball bouncing across the screen. I'm good with just about anything, okay? Both of these are due next week. Okay, both of these are due next week. So my suggestion to you is get the single jump out of the way. That's definitely the easiest of the two. It's smaller in scope, and let's get to work.